The Wyoming wind cut through the valley like a knife, carrying with it the scent of coming snow. James Hartford stood at the window of his ranch house, watching the empty road that stretched toward town. His daughter's fever hadn't broken in 3 days, and the doctor was 2 hours away in weather that threatened to close the mountain pass any moment. Behind him, 4-year-old Emma whimpered in her sleep, and his heart clenched. He'd lost his wife to childbirth fever 2 years ago. He couldn't lose Emma too, wouldn't survive it. A knock at the door startled him from his dark thoughts. No one came out this far, not in November, not with a storm building. James opened the door to find a woman standing on his porch, carpetbag in hand. Her dark hair windswept and her cheeks red from cold. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, with gentle brown eyes that seemed too tired for someone who looked barely 25. Mr. Hartford. Her voice was soft, refined, Eastern. "I'm Clara Whitmore. The agency sent me." He stared at her. "What agency?" "The domestic service agency in Cheyenne. Your neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, wrote to them 3 weeks ago. She said you needed help with your daughter." Clara's eyes moved past him into the house, and he saw concern flicker across her features. "Is the child ill?" James's mind was still catching up. Margaret Peterson, the old widow who lived 5 miles down the valley, had been pestering him about getting help since Emma's 3rd birthday. He'd refused. Hadn't wanted a stranger in his house, touching Mary's things, trying to replace her. But Emma cried out again from the bedroom, and something in him cracked. "Fever," he said, his voice rough. 3 days now. Can't get it to break." Clara didn't wait for an invitation. She brushed past him, setting her bag down and removing her coat in one fluid motion. "Where is she?" "Mom, I didn't hire anyone. There's been some mistake. We can discuss that after I see to your daughter." She was already walking toward the sound of Emma's cries, her small frame radiating a determination that surprised him. James followed her into Emma's room and watched as this stranger approached his daughter's bed. Clara sat on the edge, her hand gentle as she touched Emma's forehead. "Oh, sweet girl," she murmured. "You're burning up." She looked at James. "When did she last drink water?" He tried to remember. "This morning? Yesterday?" The days had blurred together. Clara's expression softened with understanding rather than judgment. "Mr. Hartford, I need clean cloths, cool water and honey if you have it. Also willow bark tea if you've got any." "I don't." "Then we'll make do." She was already rolling up her sleeves. "Please, the water and cloths. Quickly." Something about the quiet authority in her voice made him move. Within minutes, he'd returned with what she'd asked for, and he stood in the doorway watching as Clara worked. Her movements were practiced, efficient. She bathed Emma's face and arms with cool water, murmuring soft reassurances the whole time. When Emma's eyes fluttered open, Clara smiled. "Hello, darling. My name's Clara. I'm going to help you feel better." "Mama," Emma whispered, confused with fever. James's chest tightened, but Clara didn't flinch. "No, sweetheart, but I'm here to take care of you. Can you drink some water for me?" Over the next hour, James watched this stranger coax his daughter to drink, to take small sips of honeyed water, to rest more peacefully than she had in days. Clara never stopped touching Emma, never stopped murmuring gentle words. When Emma finally fell into a deeper, quieter sleep, Clara stood and turned to face him. She was even smaller than he'd thought, her head barely reaching his chest. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly. "She needs to keep drinking," Clara said. "Every hour through the night. The fever should break by morning if we can keep her hydrated." "Why are you here?" The question came out harsher than he intended. Clara met his eyes without flinching. "Because Mrs. Peterson's letter said a man was raising his daughter alone and needed help. Because I needed a position. Because the agency sent me. I didn't ask for help." "No, but you need it." There was no accusation in her tone, just simple truth. "Mr. Hartford, I've traveled for 3 days to get here. I have nowhere else to go. The agency's contract says I work for 3 months, room and board included. If after that time you still want me to leave, I'll go without complaint." He should send her away, should put her on the next stage back to Cheyenne. But Emma stirred in her sleep, and he remembered the terror of the past 3 days, the helplessness. 3 months. He heard himself say. "Then we'll see." Something like relief flickered across Clara's face. "Thank you. Now, if you'll show me where I'll be sleeping, I'll get settled and then sit with Emma through the night. You need to rest. You just traveled. I'm fine. Her smile was gentle but firm. I've gone longer without sleep. Besides, you look like you haven't slept properly in days yourself. She was right. He was bone-tired, running on nothing but fear and coffee. Guest rooms down the hall. I'll sit with Emma until you're settled. Clara nodded and picked up her carpet bag. As she passed him in the narrow hallway, he caught the scent of lavender and something else, something clean and feminine that made something forgotten stir in his chest. She was almost to the guest room when she turned back. Mr. Hartford, Emma will be fine, I promise. He wanted to believe her, needed to. James, he said. Call me James. Her smile was like sunrise. James, and you should call me Clara. That night, true to her word, Clara sat with Emma. James tried to sleep, but found himself checking on them every hour. Each time he found Clara awake, bathing Emma's face with cool water, coaxing her to drink, singing soft lullabies in a voice sweet as honey. By dawn, Emma's fever had broken. James stood in the doorway watching his daughter sleep peacefully, watching this small woman who'd appeared like an answered prayer he hadn't known to pray. Clara looked up and met his eyes. She was exhausted, her hair falling from its pins, her dress wrinkled, but she was smiling. She's going to be just fine, Clara whispered. And for the first time in 3 days, maybe longer, James felt something like hope. The first week passed in a careful dance of learning each other's rhythms. Clara woke before dawn, the floorboards creaking softly under her feet as she made her way to the kitchen. By the time James came in from the first check of the livestock, coffee was always ready, steam rising from the pot in the cold morning air. She moved through the house with quiet efficiency, learning where things belonged, what James liked for breakfast, how Emma preferred her eggs. She never rearranged Mary's things, never presumed to change what had been. But slowly, gently, she added her own touches. Wildflowers in a jar on the windowsill, curtains open to let in the morning light, the scent of fresh bread filling the rooms. James found himself noticing small things, the way Clara hummed while she worked, how she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the soft laugh she made when Emma said something clever. She was small, almost fragile-looking, but there was a strength in her that showed in how she handled heavy cast-iron pans, how she carried water from the well without complaint, how she never backed down when Emma tested her boundaries. On the third day, he came in for lunch to find Clara standing on a chair, trying to reach something on the high shelf in the pantry. Without thinking, he moved behind her, his hands steadying her waist. Careful, he said, and felt her go still under his touch. I just need the extra flour, she said, her voice slightly breathless. I'm making pie for supper. He reached past her easily, his chest nearly brushing her back, and pulled down the flour sack. For a moment they stayed like that, him standing behind her, his hands still on her waist, her hands gripping the back of the chair. Thank you, she whispered. He lifted her down slowly, and when her feet touched the floor, she turned to face him. She was so close, he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, could smell the faint scent of lavender in her hair. You don't have to thank me for helping in my own house, he said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. She looked up at him, her lips slightly parted, and for a wild moment he thought about kissing her, just leaning down and pressing his mouth to hers, seeing if she tasted as sweet as she smelled. But Emma's voice rang out from the yard where she was playing, breaking the moment, and Clara stepped back quickly, her cheeks flushed. The pie, she stammered, turning back to her work. James left the kitchen, his heart pounding harder than it had any right to. That night, after Emma was asleep, he found himself unable to settle. He'd been alone for 2 years, had accepted that part of his life was over. But Clara had awakened something in him he thought had died with Mary. Not just desire, though God knew he felt that too, but something deeper, a longing for companionship, for conversation, for someone to share the weight of each day. He found her in the parlor, mending one of Emma's dresses by lamplight, her needle flashing in and out of the fabric with practiced ease. You don't have to do that, he said from the doorway. I've been meaning to get around to it. She looked up with a smile. I don't mind. I like keeping my hands busy in the evenings. Nadesh, she patted the seat beside her on the sofa. Sit with me, unless you have work to do. He should go check the fence line plans, should review the supply list for the next trip to town. Instead, he found himself sitting beside her, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body, smell that lavender scent. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, her needle working steadily, him pretending to read the week-old newspaper he'd already memorized. "Tell me about the ranch," Clara said eventually. "How long have you been here?" 8 years. Bought it when I was 21 with money I'd saved working other people's land." He set down the paper. "It was rough then, just the house and a few outbuildings. But Mary and I built it up together. She was as good with the horses as I was." Clara's needle paused. "She sounds remarkable." She was. The familiar ache settled in his chest, but it wasn't as sharp as it used to be. "She grew up on a ranch, knew the work, never complained about the long hours or the isolation. We were happy." "Emma has her eyes," Clara said softly. "I've seen the photograph in her room." James nodded. "Spitting image of her mother. Sometimes it hurts to look at her, remembering, but mostly I'm grateful. It's like having a piece of Mary still here." Clara set down her mending and turned to face him fully. "James, I want you to know I'm not trying to replace your wife. I could never do that, and I wouldn't want to. I'm just here to help, to make things easier for you and Emma." "I know." He met her eyes. "But Clara, you're doing more than just helping. You're bringing life back into this house, making it feel like a home again instead of just a place where we exist." She bit her lip, and he saw tears shimmering in her eyes. "That's the kindest thing anyone said to me in years." Before he could stop himself, he reached out and brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Her skin was soft under his rough fingers, and she leaned into his touch like she was starved for gentleness. "Your fiancé was a fool," he said again. "Any man who could let you go doesn't deserve you." "Maybe I needed to be let go," she whispered. "Maybe I needed to come here, to find you and Emma." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibilities. James knew he should pull back, should maintain the proper distance between employer and employee. But God help him, he couldn't make himself move. It was Clara who finally broke the spell, standing quickly and gathering her mending. "I should get to bed. Early, start tomorrow." "Clara, good night, James." She hurried from the room before he could say more. He sat alone in the parlor for a long time after, wondering what the hell he was doing, feeling things for a woman who'd been in his house less than a week. "Papa! Look, Miss Clara taught me to make biscuits." Emma's joy was infectious as she held up a misshapen lump of dough, flour dusting her nose and cheeks. James knelt down to his daughter's level, his heart swelling at the sight of her happiness. For months after Mary's death, Emma had been withdrawn, quiet in a way that wasn't natural for a child. But Clara had coaxed her back to life with patience and gentle encouragement. "That's wonderful, sweet pea. Almost as good as Miss Clara's, I bet." Emma giggled, and the sound filled places in his heart that had been empty too long. "Miss Clara says I'm a natural baker. She says when I'm bigger I can help make the bread too. Is that so?" He glanced up at Clara, who was watching them from the kitchen table, her hands dusted with flour, a soft smile on her face. Their eyes met, and something warm passed between them. "Miss Clara's teaching me all sorts of things," Emma continued, bouncing on her toes. "Yesterday we made apple butter, and the day before we started a quilt for my bed. And tomorrow she says we can make sugar cookies if you bring sugar from town. Sounds like you're keeping Miss Clara very busy." "Oh no, Papa. Miss Clara says I'm a help, not a bother. Don't you, Miss Clara?" Clara's smile widened. "The best help I've ever had. Though I think you'd better wash those hands before you touch anything else, little miss." Emma scampered off to the wash basin, humming to herself. James stood slowly, his eyes still on Clara. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being so good with her. She hasn't been this happy since her mother passed." Clara finished gently. "I know, she told me about it yesterday, about how her mama used to sing to her and read her stories and braid her hair." His throat tightened. "She remembers more than I thought. Children remember love, James. Always." Clara stood and moved closer to him, her voice dropping so Emma wouldn't hear. "And they need it. Emma needs a mother's love, even if I'm not really her mother. I hope that's all right. More than all right." He wanted to touch her, to pull her close and tell her just how grateful he was. But Emma was right there, and the walls he'd built around his heart were still too high to scale completely. "You're exactly what she needs, what we both need." Clara's cheeks flushed pink and she looked away, but not before he saw the pleasure in her eyes. That afternoon, while Emma napped, James found Clara in the yard, hanging laundry on the line. The wind was picking up, carrying the promise of more snow, and her skirts whipped around her legs as she worked. "Storm's coming," he said, coming up beside her. "Should hit tonight. I saw the clouds earlier." She pinned one of Emma's little dresses to the line. "I've got stew on for supper, and enough wood stacked inside to keep us warm for a few days if we get snowed in." He took the wet sheet she was struggling with and hung it for her, his height making the task easier. You think of everything. I try. She handed him another sheet and they worked in companionable silence for a moment. James, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever think about marrying again? Finding someone to share the load permanently? The question caught him off guard. He looked down at her, at this small woman who'd appeared in his life like magic, and chose his words carefully. I haven't. Not until recently. Didn't think I could feel that way about anyone after Mary. But now, her voice was barely audible over the wind. Now I'm not so sure. He reached for another sheet, his hand brushing hers on the wet fabric. There's someone who's made me think maybe I could open my heart again. Someone who makes me remember what it feels like to want companionship, to want to share more than just the daily chores. Clara's breath caught, and she looked up at him with those wide brown eyes. James, but I'm not sure I have the right, he continued, his voice rough, to ask someone to take on a ready-made family, to live this hard life, to accept always being second to a ghost. What if that someone didn't mind? Clara whispered. What if she'd be honored to be part of your family, to live this life, to help you heal from the past instead of competing with it? He set down the laundry basket and turned to face her fully. The wind was whipping her hair loose from its pins, and without thinking, he reached up and tucked a strand behind her ear. His hand lingered on her cheek. What if I mess it up? He asked quietly. What if I can't be what you need? What if you're exactly what I need? She covered his hand with her smaller one. James, I didn't come here looking for love. I came here running from rejection, looking for a place to hide. But you and Emma, you've given me something I never expected to find. A home, a purpose, a reason to hope again. He was so close now he could count the freckles across her nose, could see the pulse beating at her throat. Clara! Emma's voice called out from inside the house. Miss Clara! Papa, where are you? They stepped apart quickly, both breathing harder than the simple task warranted. Clara smoothed her skirts with trembling hands. We should, she started. Yeah, he cleared his throat. Coming, sweet pea, he called back. But as Clara moved past him toward the house, he caught her hand. This conversation isn't over. She looked back at him, her eyes bright. I hope not. He looked up to find Clara watching them, something soft and sad in her expression. She turned away quickly, busying herself at the stove, but not before he saw her wipe at her eyes. Later, after Emma had gone outside to play in the fresh snow that had started falling, James approached Clara at the kitchen counter, where she was kneading bread dough. What you said earlier, he started, about Emma having Mary's eyes. Does it bother you, being compared to her? Clara's hands stilled in the dough. No, Mary was Emma's mother, and from everything I've heard, she was wonderful. I could never replace her, and I wouldn't want to try. She resumed kneading, her small hands working the dough with practiced efficiency. But I can love Emma as my own. I already do. James moved closer, leaning against the counter beside her. In Philadelphia, with your family. Were you close to them? Once. Her voice was quiet. I have 2 sisters, both married well. My parents were so proud of them, of the matches they'd made. I was supposed to be the crown jewel, though. My fiancé, Richard, came from old money, banking family. My mother planned the wedding for a year. What happened when he found out? About your condition? Clara's hands clenched in the dough. He was kind about it at first. Said we'd figure something out, that maybe the doctors were wrong. But then his mother got involved. She said the family needed heirs, that their bloodline couldn't end with Richard. Within a week, the engagement was broken, and your family sided with him. The words were bitter. My father said I'd deceived Richard by not disclosing my condition earlier. Never mind that I didn't know until after we were engaged. My mother said I'd brought shame on the family name. My sisters, she paused, swallowing hard. My sisters stopped speaking to me entirely, afraid my scandal would taint their own marriages. James felt anger burn through his chest. So they just threw you out? Not immediately. They gave me 2 choices. Find a husband who didn't care about children, or find respectable employment far enough away that I wouldn't embarrass them. The domestic service agency seemed like the best option. She finally looked up at him, tears shimmering in her eyes. I thought I'd be working for some wealthy family in San Francisco or Denver. When they sent me here instead, to the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, I was terrified. And now, a small smile curved her lips. Now, I think it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Your nowhere is my somewhere, James. This ranch, This kitchen, that little girl playing in the snow, it's more home than that fancy Philadelphia house ever was. He reached out and covered her flour-dusted hands with his own. I'm glad you came. Gladder than I can say. She turned her hands over, lacing her fingers with his. So am I. They stood like that for a long moment, hands joined over the bread dough, something unspoken but powerful flowing between them. That night, after Emma was asleep, James found Clara in the parlor as had become their habit. But instead of sitting apart, he sat beside her on the small sofa, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "Tell me about your life before," Clara said, setting aside her mending. "Before Mary? Before the ranch? Who was James Hartford before all this?" He leaned back, thinking. "Wild kid, mostly. Grew up on a farm in Kansas. Ran away at 16 because I couldn't stand working land that would never be mine. Drifted west, worked cattle drives, broke horses, did whatever paid. Nearly got myself killed half a dozen times, being reckless and stupid. What changed? Mary." He smiled at the memory. "I was working on her father's ranch, and she brought lunch out to the men one day. I took one look at her and forgot every wild notion I'd ever had. She made me want to be better, to build something lasting instead of just drifting." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Do you think you could feel that way again? Want to build something with someone?" He turned to look at her directly. "I'm starting to." Her breath caught. "James, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know you've only been here 2 weeks, but Clara, I can't stop thinking about you, about us, about what it might be like to have you here not as an employee but as more, as your wife," she whispered. Yes, the word came out rough, honest, "but I don't want to pressure you. You came here for a job, for security, not to be courted by some widowed rancher with a ready-made family." Clara shifted to face him fully, her small hand coming up to touch his cheek. "What if I wanted to be courted? What if I came here looking for safety and found something so much better?" He couldn't resist anymore. He pulled her close, tucking her against his side, and she came willingly, her head resting on his shoulder. "Tell me about your dreams," he said into her hair. "What did you want before everything fell apart?" "A family," she answered immediately. "Children of my own, a husband who loved me, a home where I belonged." Simple things, but they seemed impossible after Richard left. "They're not impossible." He tightened his arm around her. "You have Emma, and she loves you already. You have this home, and you belong here as much as anyone. And as for a husband," he trailed off, suddenly nervous. Clara lifted her head to look at him. "As for a husband, I know I'm not fancy like that banker. I work with my hands, I smell like horses half the time, and I live in the middle of nowhere. But Clara, I would love you, I would cherish you. I would never ever make you feel like you weren't enough." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You already make me feel that way. Like I'm not just enough, but exactly what's needed. Like I'm not broken, after all." He wiped away her tears with his thumbs, cradling her face in his large hands. "You're not broken. You're perfect. And if you'll have me, if you'll have us, I promise to spend every day proving it to you. Kiss me," she whispered. "Please, James, I need to know this is real." He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she only tilted her face up to meet him. When their lips finally touched, it was gentle, tentative, both of them learning the shape and taste of something new. But then Clara made a soft sound and pressed closer, and the gentleness gave way to need. James pulled her onto his lap, his hands spanning her small waist, and kissed her with 2 years of loneliness and longing pouring through him. She responded with equal passion, her fingers threading through his hair, her body molding against his in a way that made his heart pound and his breath come short. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, he rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he breathed. "I know it's fast. I know it's crazy, but Clara, marry me. Be Emma's mother. Be my wife. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved." Yes, the word was barely a whisper, but it was firm, certain. "Yes, James. Yes." He kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense, sealing the promise between them. That night, after Emma was in bed, James found Clara in the kitchen washing the supper dishes. He picked up a towel to dry. "You don't have to do that," Clara said, surprised. "House is as much mine as yours." He started drying a plate. "Besides, it's only fair. You've been working since dawn." They worked in silence for a moment before Clara spoke again. "Emma told me about her mother today. About Mary." James's hands stilled. "What did she tell you?" "That her mama's in heaven, that she was pretty and smelled like roses." Clara's voice was gentle, that her papa still misses her very much. Emma's too young to remember much, maybe, but she remembers love. Clara handed him another plate, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. That's what matters. He looked down at her, at this woman who'd walked into his life a week ago and somehow made his house feel like a home again. You're good with her, with Emma. She's easy to love. Clara's smile was wistful. I always wanted children of my own, but that isn't possible now. There was a story there, something painful. James wanted to ask, but wasn't sure he had the right. The agency, he said instead. Why domestic service? You talk like an educated woman. Clara's hands stilled in the dishwater. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. I was engaged once. To a banker's son in Philadelphia. Very respectable family. But 6 months before the wedding, he decided I wasn't suitable anymore. Why? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Because I'm barren, Mr. Hartford. The doctors confirmed it after a childhood illness. When my fiancé found out, he broke the engagement. Said he needed a wife who could give him heirs. She pulled her hands from the water and dried them with sharp, angry movements. My own family agreed with him. Said I'd brought shame on them by hiding my condition. So I left. The agency seemed like the best option for a woman with no prospects. Anger burned through James's chest. He was a fool. Clara looked up at him, surprised. Any man who'd throw away a good woman for something like that is a damn fool. He meant it with an intensity that surprised even himself. That's kind of you to say. It's not kind. It's true. He set down the dish towel. You've been here a week. And Emma's happier than she's been in 2 years. The house feels lived in again. That's worth more than anything else. Tears shimmered in Clara's eyes, but she blinked them back. Thank you. That means more than you know. He wanted to touch her, to comfort her, but he didn't know how, didn't know if he had the right. Instead, he just said, You're not barren to Emma. To her, you're someone who makes her laugh and teaches her things and tucks her in at night. That's what matters. Clara's smile was tremulous but real. She's not the only one who needed someone, is she? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning he wasn't ready to examine. No, he admitted quietly. She's not. Winter came early that year, snow falling thick and heavy by mid-November. The ranch was isolated, cut off from town except for brief clear days when James could make the hard ride to Timber Creek for supplies. Clara didn't seem to mind the isolation. If anything, she bloomed in it. She and Emma spent hours together, baking and sewing and playing games. Clara taught Emma her letters, sang her songs, told her stories. And slowly, carefully, she began to bring life back to the parts of the house James had closed off after Mary died. One afternoon in early December, he came in from the barn to find Clara in the parlor, Mary's old piano uncovered for the first time in 2 years. Dust sheets lay folded nearby, and Clara stood before the instrument with her hands hovering over the keys, hesitant. Emma said you might not like this, Clara said quickly when she heard him enter, her voice nervous. But I thought, music fills a house in a way nothing else does. And Emma wanted to hear it so badly. James stood frozen in the doorway, memories washing over him like a flood. Mary sitting at that very bench, her fingers dancing over the keys while he worked on the ranch accounts. The sound of Chopin and Mozart filling the evening air. Emma as a baby, sleeping in a cradle beside the piano, lulled by her mother's playing. I can cover it back up, Clara said when he didn't respond. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have presumed. No, the word came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat and tried again. No, you're right. Emma wants to hear it, and Mary would hate knowing it was sitting here silent. Clara turned to look at him fully, and he saw understanding in her eyes. Are you sure? Emma burst into the room then, her face bright with excitement. Papa, Miss Clara's going to play. She knows so many songs. Can she, Papa? Please. He looked at his daughter's joy, at Clara's cautious hope, and made himself nod. Go ahead. Clara sat at the piano bench, her small frame seeming almost swallowed by the large instrument. She smoothed her skirts, took a breath, and settled her hands on the keys. When she played, the music that filled the room was achingly beautiful. Not Mary's classical pieces, but something simpler, sweeter. A folk melody that spoke of home and hearth and peaceful evenings. Her touch was lighter than Mary's had been, more delicate, but no less skilled. Emma clapped with delight when the song ended. Another! Play another! Clara glanced at James, checking for permission. He nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. She played 3 more songs, each one different from the last. A hymn, a lullaby, a cheerful dance tune that made Emma giggle and twirl around the room. And with each note, James felt something shift inside him, the painful grip of the past loosening, making room for something new. When Clara finished the last song, Emma begged to be taught, and Clara lifted her onto the bench, showing her how to place her small fingers on the keys. Like this, sweet pea, gently. The piano responds to a soft touch better than force. James watched them together, their dark heads bent over the keys, and felt his heart expand with something that felt dangerously close to love. Later, when Emma was playing outside and Clara was cleaning up after lunch, he approached her at the sink. "That was beautiful," he said. "The music! Where did you learn to play like that?" "My mother insisted all her daughters learn." Clara's hands moved efficiently through the dishwater. "It was part of being a proper lady." Piano, embroidery, French dancing, all the accomplishments that were supposed to help us catch good husbands. There was bitterness in her tone that made him wince. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I'm glad you learned, and I'm glad you felt comfortable enough to uncover the piano." She looked up at him, her eyes bright. "It didn't hurt too much. Hearing it played again, it hurt," he admitted, "but in a good way, if that makes sense. Like the hurt of stretching a muscle that's been too tight for too long. It reminded me of Mary, yes, but it also reminded me that this house is for living, not for preserving like a museum." Clara dried her hands on her apron, then reached out and touched his arm gently. "Mary sounds like she was wonderful. I wish I could have known her. She would have liked you." The words surprised him even as he said them, but he realized they were true. "She would have appreciated how you care for Emma, how you've brought light back into this house." "Do you really think so?" "I know so." He covered her hand with his, holding it against his arm. "Mary loved this place, loved our life here. She wouldn't want it to die with her. She'd want Emma to grow up in a home filled with music and laughter and love. That's what I want too." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "To help make this a real home again." "You're already doing that." He turned his hand to lace his fingers with hers. Every day, in 100 small ways, they stood like that, hands joined, the winter sun streaming through the kitchen window. Outside, they could hear Emma singing to herself as she made snow angels in the yard. "James," Clara said softly, "when you said you were starting to think about opening your heart again, did you mean to me?" "Yes." There was no point in hiding it anymore. "I meant you, Clara. I've tried not to feel this way, tried to tell myself it's too soon, that I'm betraying Mary's memory, but I can't help it. When I think about the future now, you're in it. You and Emma, the three of us building a life together." Her breath caught. "I think about that too. Every night when I go to bed in that guest room, I imagine what it would be like to belong here completely, to be your wife, Emma's mother, to wake up beside you and fall asleep in your arms." The image she painted made his pulse race. "Clara, I know it's forward of me to say such things," she continued quickly. "I know proper ladies aren't supposed to speak about such matters, but I'm tired of being proper. Proper got me nowhere. Proper left me with a broken engagement and a family that turned their backs on me. Then don't be proper." He pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. "Be honest. Be real. Be yourself." "Myself wants you," she whispered, her eyes locked on his. "Wants this life, this family, this chance at happiness I never thought I'd have." He was going to kiss her, right there in the kitchen in the middle of the afternoon. Propriety be damned. But Emma's voice called out from the yard, "Papa! Miss Clara, come see my snow angel. It's the biggest one ever." They broke apart reluctantly, both breathing harder than the moment warranted. "Tonight," James said, his voice rough with promise. "After Emma's asleep, we'll talk more." Clara nodded, her cheeks flushed. "Tonight." That evening, after Emma was asleep, he found Clara on the porch, despite the cold, wrapped in a heavy shawl and staring at the stars that blanketed the Wyoming sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "You'll freeze out here," he said, stepping outside and closing the door softly behind him. "I needed air." She glanced at him, her breath visible in the cold night. "I was thinking." "About what?" He moved to stand beside her, close enough that he could feel the faint warmth from her body. "About how strange life is. 6 months ago, I was in Philadelphia, planning a wedding, to a man I thought I loved, living in a house filled with people who were supposed to be my family. And now I'm here, in the middle of Wyoming, in love with a man I've known for barely 3 weeks, feeling more at home than I ever did there." His heart stuttered at her words. "In love?" She turned to face him fully, her brown eyes reflecting the starlight. "Yes, in love. I tried not to be, told myself it was too fast, too foolish, but I can't help it, James. I love you. I love Emma. I love this life, this place, the possibility of a future here." He pulled her into his arms without thinking, crushing her small body against his chest. She came willingly, her arms wrapping around his waist, her face pressing into his shirt. "I love you too," he said into her hair, the words muffled but fierce. "God help me, Clara, I love you. I feel like I'm betraying Mary by falling so fast, but I can't stop it. Don't want to stop it." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. "You're not betraying her. Love isn't finite, James. Loving me doesn't mean you loved her any less. It just means your heart is big enough to love again. When did you get so wise?" "When I lost everything and had to figure out what really mattered." She reached up and touched his face, her cold fingers tracing his jaw. "Do you want to hear something that will probably sound crazy? Tell me. The night before I left Philadelphia, I prayed. First time in years. I asked God to send me somewhere I was needed, somewhere I could make a difference. Somewhere I could finally be enough." Her voice caught. "And he sent me here, to you and Emma, to this ranch in the middle of nowhere that feels like everywhere that matters." James covered her hand with his, holding it against his cheek. "You are enough. More than enough. So are you." She smiled through tears that were starting to freeze on her lashes. "You're everything I didn't know I needed. Strong, but gentle, grieving, but not broken. A father who loves his daughter more than anything, but is still willing to open his heart again." He kissed her then, unable to wait another moment. The kiss was desperate, hungry, filled with weeks of wanting and loneliness and hope. She responded with equal fervor, her cold lips warming under his, her body pressing closer despite the layers of clothing between them. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air that came out in white puffs, he rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said again, the words more demand than request. "Marry me soon. I don't want to wait months for a proper courtship. I don't care what people think. I just want you to be mine, officially, forever." "Yes," she laughed, the sound bright with joy. "Yes, yes, yes, as soon as we can arrange it." He picked her up then, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around on the porch while she laughed and clung to his shoulders. "We should go inside," she said when he set her down, both of them grinning like fools, "before we both catch our death of cold." "In a minute." He pulled her close again, just holding her, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "I just want to stand here and hold you and know that this is real, that you're real, that I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and find this was all a dream. It's real." She pressed a kiss to his jaw, then his neck, then the corner of his mouth. "I'm real. This is happening." They went inside finally, reluctant to break apart even long enough to walk through the door. In the warm kitchen, with the lamp burning low, James pulled Clara down to sit on his lap at the kitchen table. "Tell me everything," he said, his arms wrapped around her waist. "All the details. What kind of wedding do you want? When? Where?" She leaned back against his chest, completely comfortable. "I don't need anything fancy. Just you, Emma, and someone to make it legal. Maybe Mrs. Peterson as a witness. No fancy dress, no flowers, no reception. I had all that planned once, remember? And it meant nothing because I didn't love Richard the way I love you." She turned her head to look at him. "All I need is the promise, James. The vow that we're committing to each other, to building this life together. Everything else is just decoration." He kissed her temple, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. "You'll be the most beautiful bride Wyoming's ever seen, even without all the fuss. Flatterer, truth-teller." He tightened his arms around her. "I was thinking, after we're married, after things settle a bit, maybe we could think about adding to our family. I know you can't have children of your own, but there are orphanages in Cheyenne, Denver, even Laramie. Lots of kids who need homes." Clara went very still in his arms. "You'd do that? Take in orphans? Why not? This house is big enough. The ranch does well enough to support more mouths, and Emma would love having siblings." He paused. "Unless you don't want to. I know it's not the same as—" "It's perfect." She twisted in his lap to face him, tears streaming down her face now. "James, do you know what you're giving me? A family. Not just you and Emma, but the possibility of more children, more love, More life. It's everything I thought I'd lost forever. Then we'll do it. He wiped away her tears with his thumbs. After the wedding, after you've had time to settle in as Mrs. Hartford, we'll start looking. Maybe take in 1 or 2 to start, see how it goes. Mrs. Hartford, she repeated softly, testing out the name. Clara Hartford. It sounds right. It sounds perfect. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans and dreaming dreams, until the fire burned low and exhaustion finally drove them to their separate beds. But as James lay awake in the darkness, he knew those separate beds wouldn't last much longer. Soon, Clara would be his wife in truth, sleeping beside him, waking in his arms, building a life and a future that stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility. December brought the worst of the winter weather, snow piling high against the house, until some mornings James had to dig a path just to reach the barn. The world became small and white and silent, the ranch isolated from town by drifts that made the roads impassable for days at a time. But inside the house, life bloomed warm and bright. Clara ran the household with quiet efficiency, her days falling into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. She was up before dawn, stoking the fire, putting coffee on, starting bread dough that would rise while she made breakfast. By the time James came in from his first check of the animals, the kitchen would be warm and fragrant, Emma already up and helping set the table. "Morning, Papa," Emma would greet him cheerfully, her nightgown traded for the dress Clara had helped her pick out, her hair already braided. "Morning, Sweet Pea." He'd kiss the top of her head, then catch Clara's eye across the kitchen, and something warm would pass between them. Those morning moments became precious to him. The three of them together around the breakfast table, Emma chattering about her plans for the day, Clara's foot brushing his under the table, the sense of family settling over them like a warm blanket. After breakfast, while James worked on ranch tasks, mending tack, repairing fences that needed to be ready for spring, keeping the animals fed and watered, Clara and Emma would tackle household chores together. "Can I help with the butter today?" Emma would ask, bouncing on her toes. "Of course." Clara would tie an apron around Emma's waist, the fabric wrapped twice to fit her small body. "But remember, it takes a long time. You have to be patient." James would watch them from the doorway sometimes, these two dark-haired women working side by side, and marvel at how seamlessly Clara had woven herself into their lives. She never forced Emma to call her mama, never tried to erase Mary's memory, but she loved his daughter with a fierceness that took his breath away. One afternoon, he came in to find Emma showing Clara a drawing she'd made. "That's you and me and Papa," Emma explained, pointing to 3 stick figures. "And that's our house. And see, I drew the piano because I love when you play for us." Clara's eyes were suspiciously bright as she studied the drawing. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Should we save it to show Papa?" "He's right here." Emma had spotted him in the doorway. "Papa, look what I made." He knelt down to examine the drawing properly, his heart swelling at the sight of his family rendered in a child's hand. "That's wonderful, Emma. We should hang it up where everyone can see it." "Really?" Emma's face lit up. "Really?" He looked at Clara over Emma's head. "It's perfect." That night they did hang it up, right in the kitchen where they'd see it every day. And every time James looked at it, he felt gratitude wash over him for the woman who'd walked into his life and given him his family back. The days passed in a blur of domestic contentment. Clara taught Emma to read, pointing out letters in the old Bible and in the few books they had. She taught her to sew, Emma's small fingers fumbling with the needle while Clara guided her with patient hands. She taught her songs and games and told her stories that made Emma's eyes go wide with wonder. And in the evenings after Emma was in bed, James and Clara would sit together. Sometimes they talked, sharing stories of their pasts, making plans for the future. Sometimes Clara would play the piano while James pretended to read. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, their hands joined, finding comfort in each other's presence. But always, there was the awareness between them, the brush of fingers when passing dishes at dinner, the way their eyes would meet across the room and hold for just a moment too long, the goodnight kisses that started chaste and grew more heated each night until they had to force themselves apart before things went too far. 2 weeks until the wedding, Clara said one night in mid-December, her voice breathless as they broke apart from a kiss that had left them both shaking. I don't know if I can wait that long. James pulled her back into his arms, his control hanging by a thread. We have to. I want to do this right, Clara. Want you to be my wife in the eyes of God and the law before anything else happens. She pressed her face into his chest. I know you're right. It's just hard, wanting you so much and having to wait. Believe me, he said with feeling. I know exactly how hard it is. She laughed against his shirt, then pulled back to look up at him. Tell me about the wedding again. All the plans. It had become their evening ritual, going over the details. The minister would come out from Timber Creek on the appointed day. Margaret Peterson and her son would stand as witnesses. They'd have a simple ceremony in the parlor, with Emma holding flowers. Afterward, they'd have a modest meal, nothing fancy, just good food, and the people who mattered most. And then, Clara prompted, her eyes bright in the lamplight, and then they'll all go home. And you'll be Mrs. Hartford. He traced the line of her jaw with one finger. My wife, Emma's mother, the mistress of this house. I can't wait, she whispered. Neither could he. But the waiting wasn't all difficult. There was sweetness in it too, in the slow building of anticipation, in the knowing that they were doing this right, with respect for what had come before and hope for what was to come. One snowy afternoon, Clara was baking when Emma came running in from the parlor where she'd been playing. Miss Clara, after you marry Papa, do I get to call you Mama? Clara froze, the measuring cup in her hand forgotten. James, who'd been sitting at the table working on accounts, looked up sharply. Clara knelt down to Emma's level, her hands gentle as she took the little girl's hands. Emma, sweetheart, you can call me whatever feels right to you. If you want to call me Mama, I would be honored. But if you want to keep calling me Miss Clara, or if you want to call me something else entirely, that's all right too. But I want to call you Mama, Emma insisted. Because that's what you are. You take care of me and love me and teach me things and tuck me in at night. That's what mamas do. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. Then yes, baby, yes, you can call me Mama. And I will love you as my daughter for as long as I live. Emma threw her arms around Clara's neck, and James had to look away, his own vision blurring. When he'd prayed for help, for something to ease his burden and bring joy back to his daughter, he'd never imagined God would send him this. Not just a housekeeper or a caretaker, but a woman who could love his daughter so completely, so perfectly. That night, after Emma had gone to bed calling Clara Mama for the first time, James found his future wife in the kitchen, sitting at the table with her head in her hands. Clara, what's wrong? She looked up, and he saw she was crying. Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, too right. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this all to be taken away from me. He pulled her to her feet and into his arms. Nothing's going to take this away. I promise you that. You belong here now with me and Emma. This is your home, your family, forever. Promise? Her voice was small, vulnerable in a way he rarely heard. I promise. He kissed her forehead, her temple, her tear-stained cheeks. You're stuck with us, Clara Whitmore. Soon to be Clara Hartford, and there's no going back. She laughed through her tears. I don't want to go back. I just want to go forward. With you, with our family. Our family, he repeated, loving the sound of it. I like that. But one evening, about 10 days before the wedding, James came in later than usual from checking a fence line that had gone down in the latest storm. The house was quiet, only firelight flickering in the main room, and he found Clara sitting alone by the hearth, crying silently, her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. Clara? He was beside her in an instant, snow still melting from his coat, his hands reaching for her. What's wrong? Is Emma? Emma's fine. She's sleeping. Clara wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, embarrassed to be caught crying. I'm sorry, I'm being silly. You're not silly. He knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his larger ones. Tell me what's wrong. She took a shaky breath. Today's my birthday. 26 years old, and I'm so far from everything I used to know. My family hasn't written once since I left Philadelphia. For all they know, I could be dead. For all they care, she added bitterly. Anger flashed through James, hot and fierce, not at Clara, never at Clara, but at the family that could turn their backs on someone so precious. Their loss, he said fiercely, his hands tightening on hers. Their loss and our gain. Those people who call themselves your family don't deserve you, Clara. They gave up something rare and beautiful because of their own narrow-minded prejudice. She looked up at him through her tears. Do you mean that? Or are you just trying to make me feel better? I mean every word. He moved to sit beside her on the hearth, pulling her into his arms. These past months with you have been, Clara, you've brought light back into my life, into this house. Emma laughs again because of you. I smile again because of you. I look forward to tomorrow because of you. I'm not special, she whispered against his chest. I'm just a woman who couldn't give her fiancé children, who brought shame to her family, who ended up working as domestic help because she had nowhere else to go. No, the word was sharp, commanding. He took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. You are not just anything. You're Clara. You're the woman who walked into my house and saved my daughter's life. The woman who brought music back to these walls. The woman who looks at me like I'm something more than just a grieving widower. The woman I'm going to marry in 10 days because I can't imagine my life without you. More tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling now through them. How do you always know the right thing to say? I don't. I just say what's true. He wiped away her tears with his thumbs. I love you, Clara. I love everything about you. Your gentleness with Emma, your strength in the face of hardship, your kindness, your laugh, the way you hum while you cook, the way you fit perfectly in my arms, all of it. I love you too, she breathed. So much it scares me sometimes. I never felt this way about Richard, even when I thought I was going to marry him. What we have, it's different, deeper, real. He kissed her then, pouring everything he felt into it. Love, desire, gratitude, promise. She responded with equal passion, her arms winding around his neck, her body pressing against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I hate that you're hurting on your birthday. Tell me what I can do to make it better. She pulled back slightly, her hands coming up to frame his face. You already are. Just being here with you, being loved by you, it's the best birthday gift I could ask for. That's not enough. He stood suddenly, pulling her to her feet. Wait here. He disappeared into his bedroom, and when he came back, he was holding a small wooden box. I was going to give you this on our wedding day, but I think you need it now. Clara took the box with trembling hands. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, was a delicate gold locket on a chain. It was my mother's, James explained quietly. The only thing I have from her. I've been saving it for, well, for someone special, for the woman I'd marry. I want you to have it, Clara. I want you to wear it on our wedding day and every day after. She couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stare at the locket through her tears. Open it, he urged gently. She did, and inside found 2 tiny photographs. One was of Emma as a baby, the other of James as a young man. I put Emma's picture in a few months after she was born, he said, and mine I added this week. But there's space for more children, more family. Because that's what we're building, Clara. A family that extends beyond blood, beyond disappointment, beyond the past. A family built on choice and love. James, she managed to say, her voice breaking. This is too much. I can't. You can, he interrupted firmly, and you will. You're going to be my wife, Clara, my partner, the mother of my children, whether we have them by birth or by choice. You deserve to have something precious, something that shows how much you mean to me. He took the locket from the box and fastened it around her neck, his fingers gentle as they worked the clasp. When it was secure, he turned her to face him. Happy birthday, Clara Whitmore. Soon to be Hartford. May this be the first of many birthdays we celebrate together. May the next one find you surrounded by family, me, Emma, and whoever else God sees fit to bless us with. She threw her arms around him, holding him so tightly he could barely breathe. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me, for wanting me, for loving me despite everything. Not despite, he corrected, his lips against her hair. Because of everything. You're exactly who I need. Exactly who Emma needs. Exactly who belongs here. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, the fire crackling beside them, the locket warming between them. And when Clara finally pulled back to look up at him, her eyes were red, but her smile was radiant. 10 more days, she said. 10 more days, he agreed. And then you're mine, forever, forever. she echoed, and sealed the promise with a kiss. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of preparation. Margaret Peterson arrived one morning with her son Jacob to help with the arrangements, her plump face beaming with satisfaction. "I knew it," she crowed, embracing Clara warmly. "From the moment I sent that letter to the agency, I knew you two would be perfect for each other." "Ah, you knew?" James asked, surprised. Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "Of course I knew. A man like you shouldn't be alone, raising Emma without a mother's touch. And when I heard about Miss Whitmore's situation, well, I said a little prayer and sent off that letter." "Thank you," Clara said quietly, touching the locket at her throat, "for seeing what we needed before we knew ourselves." The older woman patted her hand. "That's what neighbors are for, dear. Now let's talk about this wedding. We need to make sure everything's perfect." They decided to make the wedding a true celebration, despite the winter cold. Margaret would bring food, her famous roast, fresh bread, apple pies. Jacob would help set up the parlor, moving furniture to make space for the ceremony. And Emma, of course, would be the flower girl, a role she took very seriously. "I need to practice," Emma insisted, marching around the house with an imaginary bouquet, walking slow and not dropping the flowers. "It's very important work, Papa." "Very important," James agreed solemnly, sharing an amused glance with Clara over Emma's head. 2 days before the wedding, Clara finished sewing her dress. It wasn't the elaborate gown she'd planned for her wedding to Richard, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. Deep blue wool, fitted at the waist, with delicate embroidery at the collar that she'd done by lamplight. When she tried it on for Emma, the little girl's eyes went wide. "Mama, you look like a princess!" The word still made Clara's heart skip. Mama. She'd never tire of hearing it. The night before the wedding, James found Clara in Emma's room, sitting on the edge of the bed and stroking the child's hair as she slept. "Nervous?" he asked quietly from the doorway. "Excited," Clara corrected, looking up at him with shining eyes. "I keep thinking about tomorrow, about standing up in front of everyone and promising to be yours forever. It feels like a dream." He crossed the room and knelt beside her, his hand covering hers where it rested on Emma's hair. "Not a dream, a promise, one I intend to keep for the rest of my life, and I intend to hold you to it." She smiled at him, then turned serious. "James, I want you to know, I understand that a part of your heart will always belong to Mary, that Emma will always be her daughter first. I'm not trying to replace her or erase her memory." "I know that." He brought her hand to his lips. "But Clara, you're not second place in my heart. You're something new, something different. Mary was my first love, the mother of my child, and I'll always treasure what we had. But you're my second chance, my new beginning, the woman I choose to build my future with." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I choose you too. Every day, for the rest of my life, I choose you and Emma, and this life we're creating together." They sat together in the quiet darkness, watching Emma sleep, knowing that tomorrow everything would change, and yet somehow stay exactly the same, because in all the ways that mattered, they were already a family. Wedding day dawned clear and cold, the sky a brilliant blue above the snow-covered landscape. James woke early, too excited to sleep, and went through his morning chores in record time. He shaved carefully, put on his best suit, the same one he'd married Mary in, but it felt right somehow, like connecting past and future, and waited for the guests to arrive. Margaret and Jacob came first, arms loaded with food and decorations. The minister arrived next, a kind-faced man named Reverend Thompson, who'd known James since he'd first come to the territory. "Good to see you taking this step," the Reverend said, shaking James's hand firmly. "Life's too short to spend it alone when there's love to be found." Emma was beside herself with excitement, her special dress, new, sewn by Clara over the past weeks, pressed and perfect. She'd insisted on wearing her hair down with ribbons woven through it, just like Clara had promised. "When is Mama coming out?" she asked for the 10th time. "When does the wedding start?" "Soon, sweet pea," James assured her, though he was just as eager as she was. Finally, Margaret took Emma aside for last-minute instructions. Jacob stood ready to play witness, and the Reverend took his place in the parlor where they'd cleared space for the ceremony. And then Clara appeared at the top of the stairs. James's breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful. The blue dress fit her perfectly, emphasizing her small waist and the curve of her hips. She'd left her dark hair down, falling in soft waves past her shoulders, and she wore his mother's locket at her throat. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright, and she was smiling at him like he was everything she'd ever wanted. "Mama's so pretty," Emma whispered loudly, and everyone laughed. Clara descended the stairs slowly, her eyes never leaving James's face. When she reached the bottom, he stepped forward and offered her his arm. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "So are you." She tucked her small hand into the crook of his elbow. "Ready?" "More than ready. Been ready since the moment you walked through my door." They moved to stand before the Reverend, Emma bouncing beside them with her bouquet of dried flowers and evergreen sprigs. Margaret sniffled from her spot beside Jacob, and Reverend Thompson began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." James barely heard the words. All his attention was focused on Clara, on the way she looked up at him with such trust and love, on the feel of her hand in his, on the knowledge that in just moments she would be his wife. "James Hartford, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" "I do." The words came out strong and sure. "I absolutely do." Clara's smile was radiant. "And do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" "I do," Clara said, her voice trembling with emotion. "With all my heart, I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Reverend Thompson smiled. "James, you may kiss your bride." James didn't need to be told twice. He cupped Clara's face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks, and lowered his head to kiss her. The kiss was gentle, appropriate for their audience, but it held the promise of deeper passion to come. When they broke apart, Emma cheered loudly. "They did it! They're married! I have a real mama and papa now!" Everyone laughed, and Margaret was crying openly as she came forward to embrace them both. "Congratulations," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "May you have many years of happiness together." The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. They ate Margaret's wonderful food, toasted with cider, and listened to Emma tell anyone who would listen about how she'd been the flower girl and done a very important job. Jacob produced a fiddle and played a few songs, and James pulled Clara into his arms for their first dance as husband and wife. She fit perfectly against him, her head resting on his chest, her small body moving in perfect time with his. "Mrs. Hartford," he murmured into her hair. "How does it feel?" "Like coming home," she whispered back. "Like everything finally makes sense." He tightened his arms around her, never wanting to let go. That night, after the neighbors had gone, and Emma was tucked into bed, the little girl had fallen asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the excitement. Clara stood in what was now their bedroom, suddenly nervous. She'd changed into the nightgown she'd sewn for this occasion, white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, modest but beautiful. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she was standing by the window, looking out at the moonlight on the snow, when James entered. He stopped in the doorway, just looking at her. She turned to face him, and he saw the nervousness in her eyes, the way her hands twisted together. "Clara," he said softly, crossing the room to her. "We don't have to. We can wait as long as you need." She shook her head, her eyes meeting his. "I don't want to wait. But James, I need you to know. With Richard, we never—" Her cheeks flamed red. "I'm frightened I'll disappoint you, that I won't know what to do." His heart swelled with tenderness. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her flushed cheeks. "Clara, love, you could never disappoint me. And I promise I'll be gentle. We'll go as slow as you need. This is about us becoming one, about showing each other love. There's no rush, no expectations, except that we care for each other." "I trust you," she whispered. "I've trusted you from the moment I walked through your door." He kissed her then, softly at first, just his lips brushing hers. But when she made a small sound and pressed closer, he deepened the kiss, his hands sliding into her hair, cradling her head as he tasted her mouth. She responded with growing confidence, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart thundering under her palms. When he lifted his head, they were both breathing hard. "I love you," he said, his voice rough with emotion and desire. "God, Clara, I love you so much. Show me," she breathed. "Show me what it means to be loved by you." He did, with patient hands and tender kisses, taking his time to learn every inch of her. He undressed her slowly, reverently, his fingers gentle on buttons and laces, his eyes dark with desire as each layer fell away. "You're beautiful," he murmured, his voice awed. "So damn beautiful, Clara." She blushed under his gaze but didn't shy away. Instead, with trembling fingers, she began to unbutton his shirt. "So are you, strong and handsome and mine." "Yours," he agreed, "always yours." When they finally came together, skin against skin in the big bed, he took his time, kissing her slowly, thoroughly, until she was breathless and clinging to him, touching her gently, carefully, watching her face for any sign of discomfort or fear. There was a moment of pain when he finally joined them, and he held her through it, whispering words of love and encouragement, staying perfectly still until she adjusted to the newness of it. And then, slowly, carefully, he began to move, and the pain faded, replaced by something else, something building and growing until Clara was gasping his name, her nails digging into his shoulders, her body arching into his. When it was over, when they lay tangled together in the aftermath, both trembling and breathing hard, he pulled her close and held her like she was something precious. "Are you all right?" he asked, his hand stroking her hair. "I didn't hurt you too much?" "You didn't hurt me." She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "You loved me, and it was beautiful." He tightened his arms around her, emotion welling up so strong he could barely speak. "I'll love you like that every night for the rest of our lives if you'll let me." "I'll let you." She smiled against his skin. "I'll insist on it, in fact." He laughed, the sound free and happy, and rolled them over so she was sprawled across his chest, her small body fitting perfectly against his much larger one. They talked late into the night, whispered conversations about hopes and dreams and the future they were building together, about Emma and the children they hoped to bring into their family, about the ranch and the years stretching ahead of them. And when they finally slept, it was wrapped in each other's arms, Clara's head on his shoulder, his hand resting protectively on her hip. Two people who'd been broken and lonely, now whole and complete in each other's love. Spring came to Wyoming with the slow, gradual warming of the land and the first green shoots pushing through the remaining patches of snow. The ranch came alive again after the long winter, and with it the Hartford family bloomed. Emma turned 5 in late March, and they celebrated with a small party. Clara made a cake, Emma's first real birthday cake since her mother died, and the little girl's joy was so complete it brought tears to Clara's eyes. "This is the best birthday ever," Emma declared, frosting smeared across her nose. "Because I have a mama and a papa, and we're a real family." James and Clara exchanged glances over her head, their hands finding each other across the table. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. James worked the ranch, preparing for the busy season ahead. Clara managed the household, tending the garden she'd started planting as soon as the ground thawed, keeping the house running smoothly. And Emma thrived, growing taller and more confident with each passing day. But Clara noticed changes in herself too. Small things at first, tiredness that seemed unusual, even for the busy spring season, a tenderness in her breasts that she attributed to her monthly cycle, nausea in the mornings that she blamed on eating too quickly. It wasn't until she missed her second monthly course that the possibility began to dawn on her. But it couldn't be. The doctors had been clear. She was barren, incapable of bearing children. Still, she counted the weeks again, her hands trembling as she marked the calendar. 8 weeks since her last course, 8 weeks of symptoms she'd been ignoring because they were impossible. She didn't tell James. Not yet. Not until she was sure. She couldn't bear to get his hopes up only to discover it was something else, some cruel trick of her body. But as March gave way to April, The signs became impossible to ignore. The nausea that came every morning, the way certain smells made her stomach turn, the exhaustion that settled over her by mid-afternoon, the fullness in her breasts. One morning in late April, she was in the kitchen making breakfast when the smell of the bacon hit her. Her stomach revolted, and she barely made it outside before she was sick in the bushes beside the porch. James found her there, pale and trembling, and his face went white with concern. "Clara, what's wrong? Are you ill?" "I don't know," she managed to say. "I've been feeling strange for weeks now, but I thought—" He helped her back inside, settling her in a chair at the kitchen table. "What kind of strange? Should I get the doctor?" "Maybe." She pressed a hand to her still flat stomach. "James, I need to tell you something, but I don't want you to get your hopes up because it's probably impossible, but I think I might be—" She couldn't say the word, couldn't voice the hope that was building in her chest. "Pregnant," James finished for her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Clara, are you saying you might be pregnant?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't know how. The doctors were so certain. But I haven't had my monthly course in 2 months, and I've been sick every morning, and I'm so tired all the time, and—" She looked up at him, terrified and hopeful all at once. "What if it's true? What if it's really happening?" James dropped to his knees in front of her, his hands covering hers where they rested on her stomach. "Then it's a miracle. The answer to prayers I didn't even know I was praying. But what if I'm wrong? What if it's something else? Then we'll deal with it together." He pressed a kiss to her joined hands. "But Clara, love, I think you're right. I think you're carrying our baby." She laughed through her tears. "I need to see the doctor. I need to know for sure. I'll ride to town today. Bring him back tomorrow if I have to carry him on my horse." James stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby. Our baby, Clara." The doctor came 2 days later, a kindly old man named Dr. Morrison, who'd been practicing medicine in Wyoming Territory for 30 years. He examined Clara thoroughly, asked her detailed questions about her symptoms, and finally sat back with a smile. "Mrs. Hartford, unless I'm very much mistaken, and I rarely am after 3 decades of this, you're with child. About 10 weeks along, I'd say. Due sometime in late October or early November." Clara burst into tears. James, who'd been pacing nervously outside the bedroom door, rushed in at the sound. "What's wrong? Is she all right?" "She's more than all right," Dr. Morrison said, packing up his bag. "She's pregnant, Mr. Hartford. Congratulations." James stared at him, then at Clara, then back at the doctor. "But the other doctors said she couldn't. They said it was impossible." Dr. Morrison shrugged. "Doctors are wrong sometimes, son. The human body is miraculous and mysterious. Sometimes what we think is permanent damage turns out to be temporary. Sometimes what looks like impossibility turns out to be just difficult." He smiled at Clara. "Whatever the case, Mrs. Hartford, you're definitely expecting. I'd say you're one of the fortunate ones." After the doctor left, James and Clara sat together on their bed, both too overwhelmed to speak. Finally, James pulled her into his lap, cradling her against his chest. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with wonder. "We're having a baby, Clara. You're giving me another child." "We're having a baby," she corrected, her hand resting on her stomach. "Not just you, us. Together. Do you know what this means?" He cupped her face in his hands. "It means every cruel thing that family of yours said about you was wrong. Every judgment they made, every rejection they handed you, all wrong. You're not broken. You never were." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I wish I could tell them, rub it in their faces that they were wrong about me. Forget them." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "They don't deserve to know about this blessing. This is ours, Clara, ours and Emma's, our family, growing just like we hoped." "We need to tell Emma." Clara wiped at her tears, smiling through them. "She's been asking for a baby brother or sister since the wedding. She's going to be thrilled." They told her that evening at dinner. Emma had been chattering about a bird's nest she'd found in the barn when James cleared his throat. "Sweet pea, Miss Clara. Mama, and I have something to tell you." Emma's eyes went wide. "What?" Clara reached out and took Emma's small hand. "Well, darling, it seems that God has decided to give us a very special gift. Next fall, around your birthday time, you're going to have a baby brother or sister." For a moment, Emma just stared at them, her mouth open. Then she screamed with delight and launched herself at Clara, hugging her so tightly Clara laughed. "A baby, a real baby, growing in your belly right now?" "Right now," Clara confirmed, her hand moving to her still, flat stomach. Can I feel it? Can I talk to it? Will it know my voice when it comes out? Emma's questions tumbled over each other in her excitement. You can feel it when it gets bigger, James said, pulling both his girls into his arms. And yes, you can talk to it. The baby will definitely know your voice. I'm going to teach them everything, Emma declared, and help you take care of them. And, oh, Papa, can we get another horse so the baby can learn to ride? James laughed, the sound free and happy. Let's wait until the baby's born before we start buying horses. That night, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, it had taken twice as long as usual. She was so excited. James and Clara lay in bed together, his hand resting gently on her stomach. I can't believe this is real, Clara whispered into the darkness. After everything, after all the doctors said, after losing Richard because I couldn't give him children, and now I'm carrying your baby, our baby. Fate, James said firmly. This is exactly how it was supposed to happen. You were meant to come here, meant to be with me and Emma, meant to give us this gift. Richard didn't deserve you, Clara. His loss, my gain. She turned to face him, her hand covering his, where it rested on her belly. I'm scared. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose the baby? What if... Shh, he pulled her close, tucking her head under his chin. Don't borrow trouble from tomorrow. Right now, in this moment, you're pregnant with our child. That's all we need to think about. You're right. She pressed closer, seeking his warmth and strength. I want this so much, James. I want to give you this baby. Want to see Emma be a big sister. Want our family to grow. It will. He kissed the top of her head. Have faith, love. This baby is a fighter, just like its mother. Just like you were a fighter when you left Philadelphia, when you came out here alone, when you took a chance on a grieving widower and his daughter. This baby has your strength in it already, and your stubbornness, she added with a watery laugh. That too, he chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. Poor kid doesn't stand a chance with the two of us as parents. They lay like that for a long time. His hand on her stomach, her hand covering his, both of them marveling at the miracle growing inside her. A miracle that shouldn't have been possible, but was. A gift neither of them had dared to hope for, but that they would treasure for the rest of their lives. That night, after Emma was finally asleep, James and Clara stood on the porch, watching the stars come out over the mountains. Do you ever think about that day I showed up? Clara asked, leaning against his side. When I knocked on your door 6 months ago? Every day. His arm tightened around her. Best day of my life, you showing up like an answered prayer. I was so scared, she admitted. I didn't know if you'd send me away, didn't know what I'd do if you did. Never. From the moment you walked in and started taking care of Emma, I was lost. He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. You saved us, Clara. Saved me from drowning in grief. Saved Emma from growing up without a mother's love. Gave us both a reason to live again. You saved me too, she whispered. Gave me a place to belong. A family to love, a future I'd stopped believing was possible. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and she tasted salt on his lips and realized he was crying. I love you, he said against her mouth. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Don't be scared. She smiled up at him. We have everything we need. Each other, Emma, this baby on the way, this house, this land. What more could we ask for? Nothing. He rested his hand on her stomach. Absolutely nothing. From inside, they heard Emma's voice calling out, Mama, Papa, can I have a glass of water? They looked at each other and laughed. Coming, sweet pea, Clara called back. As they walked inside together, James caught her hand, stopping her for just a moment. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For knocking on my door that day. For staying. For loving us. For making this house a home again. Clara went up on her toes to kiss him. Thank you for opening the door. For letting me in. For giving me the family I always dreamed of. Always, he promised. For always and forever. And as they walked inside to tuck Emma back into bed, Clara knew it was a promise he would keep. The house that had been silent with grief 6 months ago now rang with laughter and love. The man who had been drowning in loneliness had found joy again. The woman who thought herself broken had discovered she was whole. And the little girl who'd needed a mother had gotten one who loved her as fiercely as if she'd given birth to her. 6 months ago, a stranger had knocked on a door and changed 3 lives forever. Now they were a family. Broken pieces fitted together into something beautiful, something lasting, something real. Winter would come again, as it always did in Wyoming. But they would face it together, in this house filled with warmth and love and the promise of new life. And that was all the happy ending any of them would ever need.